I want to change hats. I chaired most of this morning into the afternoon, and I'm now going to become one of those that actually engages, equips and empowers. By way of the energy this morning, we see rather more engaged hearts and minds, because that's what we're in the business of. But I equally know that time is something that I was supposed to be managing, so I'm going to try and take you on a bit of a journey, past, present and future. I'm going to tell you a story, because that's what it's all about, and I'm going to challenge you, because the challenge is an immense one. It's a huge one. Everything in the past that makes the present equips us for the future. You've heard about the strategies and the policies, but I start from this. I consider 21st century sport for all as a fundamental human right. It's a civil right. And on that basis, everything that we look for, socially, culturally, economically, and societally, has a value that supersedes any of the interests here today and beyond. I want to talk to you about why it's so important to understand where we've come from, why, in an Olympic and Paralympic year, we need to be considering the significant investment that was made in those games, and why the value of it should now be looked at on the basis of the strategy, the consultation, and the 2016 Games as to whether it is really a truly legacy opportunity for all. I'm going to talk about young people, because that's my passion, and that's been my commitment for over 25 years in public life. I'm going to talk about intergenerational working, because I do not believe that we can engage, equip and empower the young without not using the wisdom and experience of the old. And when I use the word old, speak for yourself, because I'm still in there. And I sometimes wonder if we understand the language, culture and behaviour of young people. So do you know what it is to bounce? So I'm going to bounce, do you know what I'm talking about? If I'm going to diss or rush you, do you know what I'm going to talk to you about? Unless you understand that, you're nowhere near where we need to be. But ultimately, it is about a story. It's a Manchester story, a Moss Side story. It takes us through a journey that suggests you all remember those rings, and we all have a memory of those games. How many of you are actually planning to use the 2016 Games to try and work with the young people and communities that you're trying to actually affect some change with? Hands up quickly, because we haven't got time. Thank you for being so honest. Every single hand should be up, because the investment of that return of the 2012 Games hasn't even been realised yet. It's a 25-year programme. Manchester's bidding, hosting a legacy of major games is a 25-year ongoing programme. It has so much by way of return because it's come from our taxes and our lottery money. But I digress. The challenges of inspiring a generation is what saw a new sports strategy. The lack of a cultural activity framework, the lack of integrated working, too much competition as opposed to collaboration, and above all, the lack of coaches who can teach and teachers who can coach. And by that I mean, it does start in the classroom, it's extended into the playground, and it goes beyond the school gate. It has to be about how we use sport, arts, culture, and technology. And if you're not using that blended and integrated offer, again, we're just using a vaccine and an antidote without no chance of a treatment. We looked at what those challenges were and what they meant and what ultimately they would present. That's a bit of self-indulgence, because I'm the product of Sport for All. I walked into a facility that was free, any one of 7 facilities. I had disaffection, I was disillusioned, and I was disadvantaged. But I am still in here talking to you rather than outside waiting for you, because I used to hang with my crew. And that little nervous movement in your seat should sufficiently engage you to suggest I'm still upfront and personal, because if it had not been for a leisure centre, a Michael Sobel, a local authority in Islington, and a variety trust, I wouldn't have walked through that facility. There was an Olympic gold medalist in David Emery. That was somewhat cool, and he engaged us. So I went back. I walked through a door, and £1.50 saved my life. I was not a sporting protégé. It was mentally, emotionally, and physically required. But then you discover winning some titles, as I was too, and discover some gold medals gives you currency. And that currency would give me an opportunity. I won't bore you, but I've spent 4 terms as a member of Sport England, then GB Sports Council, and served my time, because in the riots of the 80s, we were going through the same issues. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, no one to show them. But sport was the vaccine. And if we look back on the 80s, Sport for All as an investment produced the most equitably diverse and inclusive bemedalled era in British sport. Because it was equitably diverse and inclusive, with all the challenges that we faced, there was an 84 games that saw that diverse GB team achieve much and inspire much. Very quickly, my first karate side was one in Manchester. There is also a need to return back from where you most have your most potent and engaging experiences. And the people who worked with me transcended from teachers, community workers, those in the clergy, and those who wanted me to go the wrong way, because they could be equally inspirational, and something we should also pay mind to. We do not have the exclusivity on sport, or the arts, or the ability to engage young hearts and minds. We are now competing for hearts and minds because we got lost in translation. But ultimately, moving back to Manchester and becoming an ambassador for the then 2000 Games, by the way, we've been bidding for 25 years. Birmingham in 92, Manchester in 96, again in 2000, successfully a 2002 Games that led to the successful 2012 Games. A long journey. But ultimately, that image is a 14-year-old schoolboy. Because whilst I was bidding and helping Manchester secure those games, in less than a mile and a half away, he was gunned down. His name was Benji Stanley. How many of you know Benji Stanley? There's one hand gone up. You will know about him in the months leading up to the games because he is the reason a number of things have happened. And he's the reason that I went back on the streets, because things had changed and I felt we needed to do something. So with a bid, with that multi-agency stakeholder relationship, and that's why the bidding and hosting of major games are absolutely invaluable. They bring people together in a common goal. There's a mutual interest. And we saw that with London, one of the most successful games ever. But how have we not been able to use 10% of that success for our communities? How have we not been able to inspire a generation on the basis that we could possibly lose a generation? So I went back on the streets. Not many people say no to me, so I launched a charter. We had a royal charter, an Olympic charter, a UN charter, so I wanted a youth charter. And what was it going to do? Provide an opportunity for young people to develop, not to achieve, to develop in life. We believe that if you got it educationally right, and there was a healthy, positive attitude, and 99% of it is between your ears, you can have enough self-esteem and respect for others to be civil and social in your behaviour. I encountered a gang culture that I thought would be retained in Los Angeles, another host games legacy city. I was part of Live Aid in 85 when Geoff used the F word. I said please, I intimidated, and people gave me what I wanted. We went to Recman and we launched. By the way, I had to convince Princess Anne, I had to convince the then Prime Minister John Major, because that was at the time of the lottery. I sometimes wonder if the lottery distracted us, seduced us, because I went to communities where volunteering was taken as a given. As one grant was given at the expense of another, it broke that community spirit. So one half of the community said, we'll leave it to the other half, and when the money ran out, guess what happened? Nothing. Because it was not credible, it was not sustainable. It was a diverse audience that congregated at Recman. Any of you remember what Recman was? It's where everybody came together, right? All the soul fogies at the back. By the way, we've got an Olympian here, we've got another couple of medals here, but they'll be revealed in their own light. But they all came a similar journey. Without all of you collectively working together, we would not be here now and able to put something back. But as you can see, it was a wide and diverse audience. The role of sportsmen and women. They're all there, they're all household names. Sir Geoff, he even went to the University of Crime. He becomes one of the most valuable aspects of the Youth Charter's work. But what I'm saying is we signed a scroll and we decided that we'd move on. We'd try and make something happen. We'd go into communities and we'd drive the change. So I decided to take some young people to Los Angeles, a games host and legacy city, because we were likened to LA and Beirut in Moss Side, because by then it got pretty crazy, if the truth be told. We came to Lancashire County Cricket Club, then, now Emirates, Old Trafford, now, where you are, And we brought together a similar audience. And we took a tour group of young people from Greater Manchester to Los Angeles. Lancashire hosted because at the end of the day we even attracted a homeless group of young people in Los Angeles on the basis of that Spirit of Human tour of LA that were to use cricket to engage homelessness. Now, Los Angeles isn't known for cricket, but any tool that could be used to engage and could empower those young people is what we'd used. And Ted Hay, a Rastafarian, dreadlocked individual of great charisma, was able to provide that all-important social coach engagement. I'll talk about the social coaches later. But always the charter, we engage through sport, arts, culture and technology. If you're not using technology, if you don't know what Minecraft is and you don't know how to use Minecraft, forget it. We need to be up to speed. It's a 2-click culture, 15 seconds of their attention retained. And how we use that to equally look at their digital behavioural lifestyles is equally the challenge and the opportunity. But we equip with life skills, tools and resilience. They have to compete, not only in their local communities, but in a global community. Because that's what smartphones have done. They've engaged with artificial intelligence and actually made them interactively active or actively interactive, depending on which way you want to look at it. But we empower. You have to empower, because by further higher education, in vocation, employability and enterprise, if that isn't part of your 3-phased approach, again, it is superficial and it is short-term. Susan Hampshire came to Moss Side. As I said at the time, it was likened to LA and Beirut. The arts are absolutely critical. Sport cannot do it on its own. I liken ourselves to the opening and closing ceremony of any major games. Believe it or not, I'm not particularly interested in what happens with all that winning stuff, which means I'm an absolute contradiction in terms. But I've got my medals. But it's what you do with it that makes it count. We've achieved much with limited resources, because I believe it has to be a value for money proposition. We have to be more efficient, effective, and value-based in that social, cultural and economic output of participation and outcomes of real, sustainable and credible impact. We also need to recognise that we've been at this for 20 years. There should be no excuses. I've now witnessed, show my age, at least 6 consultations, strategic reviews. Alignment is good. Reviewing and reflecting is good, especially now, because we have to adapt. We have to be quick, and we need to meet all that we can. But from proven pioneering, campaigning and brokering, we find a win-win-win that young people are at the very core and heart of what we do. Everyone knows who Banksy isn't, but I know who these young graffiti artists are. Because we used graffiti art to also put positive messages instead of negative. We found canvases that were urban, but that would engage them. Every single one of those young men are doing something positive. They've all gone into the marketing and media companies and are using graffiti art in a creative way. But I must reflect on this. 2002 games, 1,000 young people, 1,000 tickets from the Guardian Media Group, from 10 communities, all came to the games. No budget, 35 volunteers, 4 days of extraordinary experience. Right in the middle of that photo is Dame Mary Glen Haig, the late Dame Mary Glen Haig. She got it, she understood it, and came on the streets with me across 4 continents. But once the young people from Stonebridge squared off against the young people of Manningham, with me refereeing in the middle, they took the special needs kids from Wolverhampton. By the way, Wolverhampton is a vested interest. That's where I was born. There always has to be a vested interest. There always has to be a passion. But they came back with a glow off that Metrolink, and they went back to their communities. I was given a budget of £5,000 to deliver the 2002 Games legacy. The report is at reception. I won't digress by what we were able to do. But moving up to the 2012 Games in London, and what that legacy pledge of inspiring a generation would look like, I'd like to remind you that in 2011, young people told us exactly where they were at and exactly what they thought of us. How many of you remember those riots? Good grief. Forgotten already, huh? Well, I can tell you now, the word from the streets is they got confident. We got very close to tipping the societal, civil structures to the edge. 2 young men in Chester, who without the network being switched off, would have created a social media revolution and have seen those rights take hold. It wasn't just urban, it was suburban, and it was rural. It was a wake-up call. So we went into an extensive consultation. We undertook that, and we produced a legacy report, launched in the House of Commons. But I've always found it difficult, and many visits I make to the village of Westminster, that they would ever understand communities. I'd like to think that it's a community of Westminster. We then decided that we'd approach Sport England through the Community Activation Fund, because that report made 60 or so recommendations, but there were 3 that were absolutely critical. Because don't forget, whilst money in sport still saw us very much removed from the culture of austerity, we were very much part of a youth service cut, local authorities scaling back, and a very confused landscape. So we decided that we need to model and frame and process and governance and quality assure something that might take Manchester on its ongoing journey of how we would engage, equip and empower. And we developed a community campus. Very simply, any number of facilities that allowed young people in, because the one big issue of consultation with those young people was access. They didn't feel they could access, so they caused havoc on the streets with nowhere to go. It was then about how they were going to have the right activity, a diverse range of activity, nothing that would see them go beyond wanting to change what they did on the basis of how they felt, or what their friends were trending, or what they felt was cool. But then thirdly, the right people, because it was absolutely critical that we needed to understand sports development in the community, which is what our governing bodies were doing, and community development through cultural activity, which is what the street games, which is what the Kelly Holmes Trust, the Youth Sports, all of these agencies that have evolved over the last number of years, who I must say have been doing things to the community, where street games, very refreshingly, have conveyed the new culture of allowing community to do it for themselves. But they need to be equipped. So we decided on what that would look like, on the basis of what would be multi-agency stakeholder relationships. So we've pulled the private, the public, the third sector, the community sector. We've looked at what that means by way of somewhere to go. And those facilities have now opened their doors. They give us 5 hours a week. On that ability to do that, we're then looking at something to do, because that is absolutely critical. And that something to do is classroom playground beyond the school gate. It's smartphone interactive. It's code for youth, digital, in its passport and its membership. It gives real-time data and analysis, insight if you want to call it. But they book their sessions. We're able to find out whether they like it, they don't like it, or how we can change and adapt to meet their needs. By the way, we're not about giving them what they want. This is not what it's about. That's why we've ended up in the situation we have. There's a clear line about what they need and what they want. And we're there to help support them, not carry them. Or else we do genuinely disable them, disaffect them, and I feel disillusion them. With all of that and more, once they've got something to do, as I said, it's about someone to show them. This is the most critical part of the journey. I made reference to the people who inspired me, and I decided that of late it was too much about skills and technique. We need emotional intelligence. We need to look at the behavioural lifestyle trends. We need to look at it over a long journey of different pace and different motivations and different feelings, because young people are bringing and building significant challenges on the emotional baggage they bring. The social coach was developed over the last 20 years. And we have now activated it into something that can bring together all the diverse experiences into one collective, accredited leadership program. It's something that we've now developed, again with the Community Activation Fund, and the findings are now very, very revealing. But without social coaches, you can't improve participation, you cannot sustain participation, and you cannot make it credible. Young people are part of that, especially from the universities and from the NEETs, one of the biggest toxic currencies that we need to grapple with. But ultimately, it's about how we measure. So from the local to the mapping, tracking and measurement, the project management, the governance, the due diligence, we've equally looked at that, and there are now interactive portals in place. The community audit has been conducted, and as Simon had said earlier, it can take months to establish that trust, to get the confidence to a place where you're able to do the all-important engagement phase of seeing what might be provided by way of empowerment. But just so you understand, it is always about how we go local to the sub-regional. With devolution, it's about skills. There are 100,000 jobs that are going to be available in this region. £3 billion worth of infrastructure projects. The Etihad campus in particular, with Manchester City Football Club embracing the wider community, but how Greater Sport and other partners and how we work together is how we will get Greater Manchester moving. How the Black Country Partnership will do similar engagement and activity, because it needs to be diverse, as Rod mentioned earlier. It needs to be creative. It needs to be representative. It has a national dimension. Already we're sharing what's being learned, because if you don't think young people are sharing what they're up to, then you're deluded also. And it equally has an international dimension, because we are as local as we are global, and it is part of that recognition that sees us get to where we need to get to. But our experience is based on a long journey. It was about changing a tragedy into an opportunity. It was about taking every single element of what we were about and what we would inspire, taking us to a point in time where we looked at the young people and their communities, and I have now been the length and breadth of this country, inner city, suburban and rural. We have come up with a model, a framework, tools that have been equally developed by that diverse multi-agency stakeholder relationship. But the challenges are immense. We know these processes take time. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to match the pace of youth culture and the speed at which they're able to move at. I would equally say to you that there is as much diversity in policy considerations and strategy that is required as the diversity of youth culture and wider community that we're aiming to work with. The health engagement public policy agenda is single-handedly able to address this shortfall that we find, but we have to work together. On the streets, they are working together. They are coordinated. They are focused. We cannot compete. We're going to have to work together in order to address this massive challenge as we move forward. When I decided to get involved or resurface, I knew that this year's Games, in both Olympic and Paralympic significance, could not be just seen as about the medals. Our governing bodies are now focusing on Rio. For those other governing bodies who aren't Olympic and Paralympic, we need to be engaging in a more creative way. I will say this to you, having been in Brixton and been rather one of the potential bad boys in Brixton at a time where East End didn't even go to South London, an equestrian centre is not what will engage that youth culture. Anyone remember Oliver Skeets? Rastafarian show jumper in the 80s. He didn't exactly inspire a generation. So I don't want to put a pressure on those governing bodies who genuinely don't get this, but are doing it because it has the right funding arrangements around the whole sport plan. We need to mobilise. We need to move at pace, and we're going to need to collaborate, irrespective of what you look like, where you come from, what you believe in, what you sound like, or whatever lifestyle trends you might have. It needs to be intergenerational, it needs to be collaborative, it needs to be cohesive. And Geoff Thompson did tell you, the word from the streets are telling you. But if anything needs to really the boy in the middle holding the scroll is Ryan Wilson. He was stabbed to death a year and a half ago. He had great potential. I have witnessed over 200 lives under the age of 21 who will not be an inspired generation. You will hopefully get a feel from me as I'm engaging with you that I am not a happy man. Because I thought Benji Stanley would have inspired a truly collaborative effort that would have seen those not only have lost their lives, but have gone to the University of Crime, and on this woulda, shoulda, coulda, suggest that sport for development for peace. Let us not be so arrogant. Ryan's life has already inspired a trust for Trafford, but we're still having to battle on what that really means, and even having his name recognised. But this is a fight worth fighting. It was personal. but it is professional. And it must always be a simple recognition of fact. By the way, my sons went to school with Ryan. He came to my home at their birthday parties. That's why I'm back on the streets. That's why I'm upfront and personal. And that's why I will not take no for an answer. If anyone would like to train with me, because it is still a requirement, because when I engage with them, they still think I'm an Uncle Coconut or an Uncle Tom. But hey, it's upfront and personal. You must take this to where it naturally must be. The late President Mandela, post-apartheid South Africa, is equally a reason that we are enjoying what we are enjoying today. As I launched a charter in '93, I went to South Africa and I saw communities doing it with nothing, no strategies, no governance, no funding pots, nothing. But they had people, the Ubuntu spirit. Steve Biko, the apartheid hero, the community empowerment model is what I brought back to Moss Side, and we made it work. So his legacy equally drives us, equally motivates us, and suggests everything is possible. But please do not in any way underestimate where this has come from, where we are now, and why we need to work together, and why we genuinely need to find our way to make a difference. And as I will say, we've already lost lives in Olympic and Paralympic year. They've been lost in London. There's a few expecting to be lost up here. Michael will tell you what's happening in Birmingham. Simon will tell you what's happening in Wolverhampton. I know what's happening in Glasgow. So the core cities, everything we're talking about, means it will require every single one of you making that effort. Sport for all, sport for a few, sport for good, sport for change. I would just simply like to think that it is an opportunity for those who least. Do you feel me? Because if you don't, you're in the wrong sector, the wrong industry, because it's a movement. But I hope the lives lost will inspire you to inspire a generation going forward. Thank you.